You never forget the moment your heart turns to stone. Not from anger, but from clarity. Yesterday, as the laughter echoed through my son's lavish house, I overheard words not meant for my ears. "She's just a burden. We can't keep doing this." My daughter-in-law's voice was cold, sharp, and certain. I felt the sting, but I did not let it show. Instead, something inside me settled, a kind of resolve I didn't know I still had after 65 years of giving, forgiving, and fading into the background. My name is Margaret Wilson, and for most of my life, I have been the silent pillar holding up a family that never truly saw me. Where are you watching from? Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Now, let me take you on the journey of how I reclaimed my dignity, one secret at a time. "Mom, could you get the cheese platter from the kitchen?" David called out, not bothering to look in my direction as he gestured toward the crowd of neighbors, filling his living room. I nodded, though no one was watching, and made my way through the sea of guests. This was how it always went at David's parties, me floating from room to room like a ghost, refilling drinks, clearing plates, receiving the occasional nod of acknowledgement. "Margaret, you're such a treasure," Mrs. Henderson from next door said as I passed with a tray. "Always so helpful." "Thank you," I replied softly, but she'd already turned back to her conversation with Jessica. My daughter-in-law stood at the center of the room, radiant in her emerald dress, regaling everyone with stories about their latest vacation. The one I'd helped pay for, though she'd never mentioned that detail. "Jessica's such an amazing hostess," someone gushed. "Oh, you're too kind." Jessica laughed, her voice carrying that musical quality that had charmed David years ago. "I just love bringing people together." I watched my grandchildren, Ethan and Lily, sprawled on the couch with their phones, barely glancing up when I offered them drinks. 19 and 16, old enough to acknowledge my existence. Yet somehow, I remained invisible to them too. In the kitchen, I began arranging crackers around the cheese, my movements automatic after years of practice. That's when I heard Jessica's voice drift in from the hallway. "I don't know how much longer we can do this, David." "Keep your voice down," my son replied. "I'm serious. She's just always here, always watching, always hovering. I wish she'd find somewhere else to live. She's just a burden now." My hands stilled on the platter. A burden. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, that's what I'd become. "Maybe we should look into those senior communities," David said, his voice uncertain. "Exactly. She'd be happier with people her own age. We could visit on weekends." I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to breathe. They spoke about me like I was a problem to be solved, a piece of furniture to be relocated. The irony wasn't lost on me. Standing in the kitchen of a house I'd helped them buy, preparing food for a party where I was treated like hired help. I thought about the double shifts I'd worked as a nurse to put David through college, the nights I'd stayed up helping him with homework, while Jessica was out with friends, the down payment I'd quietly contributed when they bought this house, never asking for recognition or repayment. "There she is," David said as I emerged with the platter, his tone artificially bright. "Thanks, Mom." I set the cheese down without a word, watching as guests immediately swarmed it. Jessica smiled at me, that practice smile she'd perfected over the years, and I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was awake. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of refilled glasses and cleared plates. I observed everything with new eyes. How Jessica accepted compliments for my cooking, How David basked in praise for their beautiful home. How my grandchildren treated me like part of the furniture. When the last guest left, I helped clean up, in silence. Jessica yawned dramatically. "What a wonderful evening," she said. "I'm exhausted. David, could you finish up? I need my beauty sleep." "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her cheek. She headed upstairs without a glance, in my direction. David loaded the dishwasher, humming softly. "Great party tonight," I said. "Yeah, Jessica really outdid herself," he replied, missing the irony entirely. I retired to my small room, the converted office where I'd lived for the past 3 years. As I sat on the edge of my bed, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Clarity. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. "Helen, do you remember Tom's funeral?" I asked my sister-in-law during our weekly phone call the next morning. "Of course, honey. Why do you ask?" I stared out my bedroom window, at David's perfectly manicured lawn. "Do you remember what I promised at his graveside? You said you'd take care of the children, no matter what. And I did, didn't I?" Helen's voice softened. "Margaret, what's wrong? You sound different." I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about feeling like a burden in my own son's house, about the years of sacrifice that had been erased from their memories. "When David was 12, I said, "he wanted that bicycle so badly, the red one with the racing stripes. Do you remember? You worked extra shifts for 2 months to buy it. And when he crashed it the first week, what did—" "I do? You told him accidents happen and bought him a helmet for next time." I smiled despite myself. "When Rachel wanted that wedding dress, the one that cost more than my monthly salary, what did I do?" "You picked up overtime at the hospital. You barely slept for months. And when David and Jessica needed help with their house down payment," Helen sighed, "you gave them your savings. Margaret, why are you doing this to yourself?" "Because I'm trying to remember who I used to be, before I became invisible." "You were never invisible to me." "But I was to them, Helen. I've spent so many years making myself small so they could feel big. I remember Rachel's graduation party. I did all the cooking, all the planning, and she thanked everyone except me in her speech. Kids don't always realize. She was 24, Helen, not a kid anymore." I walked to my dresser and pulled out a photo of Tom and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so hopeful. "Tom always said I was too generous," I continued. "He'd say, 'Maggie, you can't give people more than they're willing to receive.' I never understood what he meant until now." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm tired of being grateful for scraps from the table I set." After hanging up, I called Rachel in California. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom. Can I call you back? We're about to head out to brunch." "It's important, Rachel." She sighed. "What's wrong now?" "Wrong now? As if every conversation with me was a problem to be solved." "I was just thinking about your wedding day. Do you remember who paid for it?" "Dad's life insurance, right?" "No, sweetheart. That money went to pay off his medical bills. I paid for your wedding with overtime money." Silence stretched between us. "Oh," she finally said, I didn't know that." "There's a lot you don't know, Rachel. A lot none of you know." "Mom, are you okay? You sound upset." "I'm fine. Go to your brunch." After I hung up, I sat, in the quiet of my room, remembering. Tom's funeral on that gray October day. David, barely 18, trying to be strong. Rachel, 15, and sobbing into my shoulder. The stack of medical bills on our kitchen table. The second job I took cleaning offices at night while they slept. I'd kept so many struggles from them, wanting to protect their childhood, their dreams. Now I wondered if I'd protected them too much, sheltered them from the reality of sacrifice, until they expected it without question. The house creaked around me, settling into its afternoon silence. Somewhere downstairs I could hear Jessica on a work call, her voice animated and professional. This was her domain now, her stage. I was just the understudy who never got to perform. But that was about to change. "Margaret, could we have a chat?" Jessica's voice was honey-sweet as she knocked on my bedroom door the next morning. I opened, it to find her perfectly put together despite the early hour, her blonde hair styled and her makeup flawless. "Of course. Come in." She perched on the edge of my reading chair, her posture careful and composed. "I wanted to talk to you about your living situation." "My living situation?" "David and I have been discussing it, and we think you might be happier in a place more suited to your needs." I sat on my bed facing her. "What kind of place?" "Well, there are some lovely senior communities nearby, places where you could have your own space, activities with people your age, maybe some help with daily tasks." "Daily tasks?" Her smile faltered slightly. "I just mean, as we get older, it's nice to have support systems in place." "I see? And David agrees with this?" "He's concerned about you, Margaret. We both are. You seem lonely here, isolated." The irony was breathtaking. I was lonely because they'd made me invisible, and now they wanted to make me literally absent. "When would you like me to leave?" Relief flooded her features. "Oh, we're not rushing you. Take your time. Maybe start looking at places. See what appeals to you. We just want you to be happy." "How thoughtful." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm so glad we could talk about this like adults. I was worried you might be upset." "Why would I be upset about being asked to leave my home?" "This isn't really your home, though, is it?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, revealing the truth beneath her polite facade. "I mean, David and I built this life together. We thought you'd want your own space eventually." I nodded slowly. "You're right. This isn't my home." She looked surprised by my agreement. "Exactly. See, I knew you'd understand." After she left, I sat in the silence of my room, staring at the walls I'd helped paint 3 years ago, when they'd generously offered me this space, the converted office with no closet, no bathroom of my own, no real privacy. I walked to my bedside table and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a manila folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents I'd filed away and nearly forgotten, the original mortgage papers for this house, the refinancing documents, and most importantly, the final payment receipt. David and Jessica had struggled to qualify for their dream home 7 years ago. Their credit was good but not great, their savings minimal. They'd needed a co-signer with substantial assets and income. They'd also needed help with the down payment. Help I'd provided quietly, allowing David to maintain his pride as the family provider. What they'd never known was that when Tom's life insurance finally came through 2 years later, I'd used it to pay off the remaining mortgage balance entirely. The house was mine, legally and completely. I'd kept quiet about it, wanting my son to feel successful, accomplished. Now I realized my silence had been a mistake. I picked up my phone and called Linda Carter, an old friend from my nursing days, who'd become a paralegal after retirement. "Linda, it's Margaret Wilson. I need some legal advice." "Of course, honey. What's going on?" I need to understand my rights regarding a property I own where my family is currently living. Are they not paying rent? It's complicated. Can we meet for coffee this afternoon? Absolutely. This sounds serious. It is. More serious than they realize. That evening at dinner, David was unusually quiet. Jessica chatted about her day, but I noticed her glances in my direction, gauging my mood. "Mom," David finally said, "Jessica mentioned you two had a good talk today." We did. "And you're okay with everything?" I set down my fork and looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he gotten those lines around his eyes? When had his hair started thinning at the crown? "David, do you remember when you were 8 and you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with your baseball?" He looked confused by the subject change. Vaguely. Why? "You were so scared to tell me. You thought I'd be furious." "You weren't, though. You helped me apologize and pay for it with my allowance." "Do you remember what I told you that day?" He shook his head. "I said that mistakes only become problems when we try to hide from them. That honesty, even when it's hard, is always better than silence." Jessica looked between us, sensing an undercurrent she couldn't identify. "I think it's time we were all honest with each other," I continued. "Don't you?" David's face grew wary. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time to stop pretending. About this house, about my place in this family, about a lot of things. Mom, you're scaring me." I smiled, feeling oddly peaceful. "Don't be scared, sweetheart. Truth isn't something to fear, though I suspect you might find it surprising." I excused myself and retired to my room, leaving them to wonder what I meant. Tomorrow, I decided, would be the day for revelations. "Linda, I need you to explain this to me like I'm 5 years old," I said, spreading the documents across the coffee shop table between us. My old friend adjusted her reading glasses and examined each paper carefully. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "Margaret, do you understand what these documents mean?" "I think so, but I want to be certain. You own that house, completely. No mortgage, no liens, nothing. It's yours free and clear." "And David and Jessica?" "Have no legal claim to it whatsoever. They're essentially your tenants, whether they realize it or not." I sipped my coffee, letting that sink in. "What are my options?" "Well, legally speaking, you could evict them with proper notice. But, Margaret, that's your family we're talking about. Family that wants to put me in a nursing home." Linda's eyebrows shot up. "They want to what?" I told her about Jessica's conversation, about feeling like a burden in my own house. Linda's expression darkened with each detail. "Those ungrateful—" She caught herself. "I'm sorry. I know they're your children." "Don't apologize. I'm starting to see things clearly for the first time in years." "So what do you want to do?" I thought about it carefully. "I don't want to hurt them, Linda. But I need them to see me. Really see me. I need them to understand what I've given up, what I've sacrificed, and what I continue to contribute." "And if they don't?" "Then I'll make sure they understand the consequences of taking me for granted." That evening, I started making lists. Not grocery lists or to-do lists, but accounting lists. Every dollar I'd contributed to David's education, every payment I'd made toward their house, every babysitting session, every meal cooked, every load of laundry folded. The numbers were staggering. I also began observing my family with new eyes, really watching their interactions, their assumptions, their casual dismissal of my presence. "Grandma, Can you make your famous pot roast tomorrow? Lily asked during a rare moment when she looked up from her phone. I don't know, sweetheart. I might be busy. She looked genuinely surprised. Busy with what? Legal matters. David, who'd been scrolling through his own phone, looked up sharply. Legal matters? Mom, what's wrong? Are you sick? I'm fine, David. Just taking care of some long overdue business. What kind of business? Jessica's voice had an edge to it. The kind that should have been handled years ago. Over the next few days, I made several calls. To my bank, to confirm my account balances, to a real estate agent, to understand current property values, to another old friend who worked at a senior living facility. Not because I wanted to move there, but because I wanted to understand what Jessica was really suggesting when she talked about places more suited to my needs. I also researched tenant rights and eviction procedures. Not because I planned to use them, but because I wanted to understand the full scope of my position. The transformation in my thinking was gradual but profound. For decades, I'd defined myself by what I could give others. Now I was learning to define myself by what I was worth. Mom, you're acting strange, Rachel said during our next phone call. Strange how? Different. Like you're planning something. What if I am? That doesn't sound like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm 65 years old, Rachel, and I'm tired of being invisible. You're not invisible, Mom. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, my interests beyond what I could do for your family? Silence stretched across the phone line. That's what I thought, I said gently. But it's not too late to change that, for any of us. Mom, are you okay? Really? I'm better than I've been in years, sweetheart. I'm finally awake. The next morning, I found David and Jessica whispering in the kitchen. They stopped abruptly when I entered. Good morning, I said cheerfully. Morning, Mom. David's smile looked forced. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you. I've been sleeping better lately. Clearer conscience, I suppose. Jessica's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Clearer conscience? Yes. There's something liberating about finally deciding to be honest about everything. Don't you think? I poured myself coffee and took a seat at their kitchen table. My kitchen table, I reminded myself, and smiled at their worried faces. Would you two like to hear a story about a house? I asked. David, Jessica, could you both sit down, please? I have something important to discuss with you. It was Saturday morning, and I'd chosen my moment carefully. Ethan was at basketball practice, Lily was sleeping in, and the house was quiet. David looked up from his laptop with mild annoyance, while Jessica glanced at the clock as if calculating how much of her weekend this would consume. What's this about, Mom? David asked, settling reluctantly onto the couch beside his wife. It's about honesty, and this house, and the future. Jessica's manicured fingers drummed against her coffee mug. If this is about the conversation we had earlier this week, it's about much more than that. I sat across from them, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I want to tell you a story about a young couple who fell in love with a house they couldn't afford. David's brow furrowed. Mom, what are you getting at? I'm getting to the truth, sweetheart. The truth about this beautiful home you're so proud of. I pulled out the manila folder I'd been carrying and set it on the coffee table between us, their eyes fixed on it like it might explode. 7 years ago, you two found this house, remember? You called me so excited talking about the perfect neighborhood, the great schools for the kids you wanted to have. I remember. David said slowly. You also remember that you needed help qualifying for the mortgage. Your credit was good, but not quite good enough. Your savings were adequate, but not quite adequate enough. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Your mother helped us with the down payment, David. We've always been grateful for that. Have you? I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Because gratitude isn't quite the word I'd use to describe being called a burden in my own home. Mom. David started, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. Please. I set the mortgage papers on the table. These are the original documents. See this signature? That's mine, as co-signer. And this amount here? That's the down payment I provided. They both leaned forward, studying the papers as if seeing them for the first time. Now, this document, I continued, pulling out the refinancing paperwork, is from 2 years later, when Tom's life insurance finally came through. I remember that. David said. You said it helped you feel more secure. It did. In fact, it made me secure enough to do something I've never told you about. I pulled out the final payment receipt. I paid off your mortgage, completely, the entire remaining balance. The silence stretched so long I could hear the kitchen faucet dripping. What do you mean, paid it off? Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. I mean, this house has been mortgage-free for 5 years. I mean, legally, officially, and completely. This house belongs to me. David's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, something approaching panic. That's not possible, he stammered. It's not only possible, it's documented. Linda Carter confirmed it with her legal contacts this week. I own this house, David. Free and clear. Jessica looked like she might faint. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted you to feel proud of what you'd accomplished. I wanted you to feel like successful adults who'd built something beautiful together. I kept quiet so you could have your dignity. But if you own the house... David's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. Then you've been asking me to leave my own home? Yes. Jessica's coffee mug clattered against the table as she set it down with shaking hands. We didn't know, Margaret. We had no idea. I know you didn't. That's the problem. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years when he was overwhelmed. Mom, I don't understand. If you own the house, why let us think otherwise? Because I love you. Because I wanted you to feel capable and independent. Because I thought that by staying in the background, I was helping you shine in the foreground. I leaned forward. But what I've learned is that my invisibility didn't make you stronger. It made you careless. It made you take me for granted. We don't take you for granted, Jessica protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't you? When was the last time either of you thanked me for cooking dinner? For doing laundry? For babysitting so you could have date nights? When was the last time you asked if I needed anything, wanted anything, dreamed about anything? They exchanged glances, and I could see the truth dawning in their faces. Yesterday, I continued, you suggested I move to a senior community because I seemed lonely and isolated. Did it occur to you that I might be lonely because you've made me feel unwelcome in my own home? That I might be isolated because you treat me like hired help, rather than family? Mom, we never meant... David began. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but intention and impact aren't the same thing. I gathered the documents back into the folder. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not throwing you out. I'm not seeking revenge, but I am done being invisible. I am done being taken for granted. And I am done apologizing for taking up space in my own life. Jessica was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her cheeks. Margaret, I'm so sorry. The things I said were honest, and I appreciate honesty, even when it hurts. But now, you need to understand that your honesty has consequences. David looked stricken. What do you want from us, Mom? I want respect. I want recognition. I want to be included in decisions about this household, instead of being asked to leave it. I want to be seen as a person with value, not as a burden to be managed. You have that, he said quickly. Of course you have that. Do I? Then why was I not consulted about your decision to ask me to move out? Why do you accept compliments for meals I've cooked and parties I've planned? Why do your children know nothing about their grandmother, except that she'll babysit when needed? The questions hung in the air like accusations, which I suppose they were. Things are going to change, I said, standing up. Not because I'm threatening you, but because I'm finally standing up for myself. You can choose to be part of that change, or you can choose to resist it. But either way, change is coming. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Jessica, those senior communities you researched. I looked into them too. They're lovely places, but they're not for me. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard them begin to whisper frantically to each other. For the first time in years, they were talking about me, but this time I held all the cards. My phone started ringing at 7:30 the next morning. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Mom, what the hell is going on? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. David called me last night. He said you own his house? That you've been lying to them for years? I sat up in bed, reaching for my robe. I haven't been lying to anyone, Rachel. I've been protecting your brother's pride. By letting him think he owned his own home. By letting him feel accomplished. By letting him feel like a successful provider for his family. That's manipulative, Mom. The accusation stung, but I kept my voice level. What's manipulative is asking someone to leave their own home without bothering to find out who actually owns it. Silence stretched between us. I could hear Rachel's breathing, could practically feel her recalibrating. He said Jessica asked you to move out. She did, very politely. She thought I'd be happier in a senior community with people my own age. And you never told them you owned the house? Would you have told your children they were living in your house if you thought it would make them feel like failures? Another pause. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Well, I didn't. And now they know. And apparently, you think that makes me the villain in this story. I don't think you're a villain, Mom. I don't understand why you kept such a big secret. The same reason I never told you I worked 2 jobs to pay for your wedding. The same reason I never mentioned the overtime shifts I picked up to help with your college expenses. The same reason I've spent my entire adult life making myself smaller, so you and David could feel bigger. Mom, you want to know what's manipulative, Rachel? Having children who only call when they need something, who visit out of obligation rather than love, who plan their father's funeral around their work schedules, and then leave their mother to grieve alone. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? Not because David asked you to. Not because you needed something, but because you actually cared about my well-being. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. I call, she finally said, but her voice was small. You call when it's convenient. You visit when it fits your schedule. You include me in your life when it doesn't require any real effort on your part. Mom, that's not... I've been busy with work and the kids. Everyone's busy, Rachel. But we make time for what matters to us. I heard her crying then, soft sniffles through the phone. I'm not trying to hurt you, sweetheart. I'm trying to wake all of us up. This family has been running on autopilot for so long that we've forgotten how to actually see each other. I see you. Do you? What's my favorite book? What do I dream about? What scares me? What makes me happy besides taking care of all of you? I don't know. And that's the problem. Not just with you, but with all of you. I've been so busy being useful that I forgot to be interesting. And you've all been so comfortable with me being useful that you never bothered to find out who I am beyond what I can do for you. I want to know, she whispered. I want to know those things. Then ask me. Visit me. Call me when you don't need anything except conversation. I will. I promise. Don't promise, Rachel. Just do it. After we hung up, I made myself breakfast and sat in the garden with my coffee. It was a beautiful morning, crisp and clear, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Around noon, Helen arrived with a casserole and a bottle of wine. I brought reinforcements, she announced, bustling into the kitchen like she owned the place. David called me this morning. He sounded like he'd been hit by a truck. Good. Maybe that means he's finally awake. Helen studied my face. You don't look like someone who just dropped a nuclear bomb on her family. I look like someone who finally told the truth. Are you sure about this, Maggie? Once you ring this bell, you can't unring it. I'm sure. Helen, I've spent 47 years of marriage and motherhood making everyone else comfortable at my own expense. I'm done. She poured us each a glass of wine, even though it was barely past lunch. Tell me everything. I did. I told her about Jessica's request, about David's silence, about the years of feeling invisible in my own life. I told her about the documents in my drawer and the realization that I'd given away my power in the name of love. You know what the worst part is? I said, swirling the wine in my glass. I don't think they meant to hurt me. I think they genuinely believed they were helping by suggesting I move out. They've gotten so used to not seeing me that they forgot I might have feelings about being displaced. And now? Now they know. And now we'll see what they choose to do with that knowledge. As if summoned by my words, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway. At 19, he was tall like his father, but with a gentleness in his eyes that reminded me of Tom. Grandma? Can I talk to you? Helen took her wine and casserole into the living room, giving us privacy. Of course, sweetheart. Sit down. He slumped into the chair across from me, running his hands through his dark hair. Dad told me about the house, about how you own it and everything. And what do you think about that? I think I've been a really crappy grandson. The admission caught me off guard. Ethan. No, I have been. I live in your house, eat your food, barely talk to you except when I need something, and I never even knew. I never even thought about how you might feel about any of it. You're 19 years old. It's not your job to think about my feelings. Isn't it, though? I mean, if we're family, shouldn't we care about each other? Shouldn't we actually know each other? I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. What do you want to know? Everything. I want to know about when you were my age. I want to know what it was like being married to Grandpa. I want to know what you wanted to be when you grew up, and if you got to be it, and what you still want to do. For the next 2 hours, we talked. Really talked. I told him about meeting his grandfather at a hospital dance when I was 22, About wanting to be a writer before I became a nurse. About the novel I'd started writing 3 times and never finished. About my dream of traveling to Ireland someday. He told me about his confusion over choosing a college major. About a girl he liked but was too nervous to ask out. About his fear that he wasn't smart enough or driven enough to make his parents proud. You know what's funny? He said as the afternoon light faded. I always thought you were just, I don't know, content with everything. Like being a grandma was all you ever wanted. Being a grandmother is wonderful, Ethan. But it's not all I am. I get that now. And Grandma? I'm sorry it took this long for me to figure it out. When Lily wandered down an hour later, she found us poring over old photo albums. To my surprise, she curled up on the couch beside me and started asking questions about the pictures, about her grandfather, about my life before she existed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being seen, not as a function or a service, but as a person with a history, with stories worth telling. Maybe this truth-telling business was going to work out after all. We need to have a family meeting, I announced at dinner 3 days later. Everyone. Saturday afternoon. No phones, no distractions, no excuses. David looked up from his plate, nervously. Mom, what kind of meeting? The kind where we tell the truth, all of it. I've invited Helen and Linda to join us. Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. Why do we need outsiders? They're not outsiders. They're the closest thing I have to sisters, and they've watched this family for decades. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see what we're too close to notice. What exactly are we going to discuss? David asked. Everything we've been too polite, too proud, or too scared to say to each other. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching the mood in the house. I'd prepared carefully, setting up the living room with enough seating for everyone. Helen arrived first, carrying a plate of her famous brownies and a thermos of coffee. You sure about this, Maggie? I'm sure. It's time to clear the air completely. Linda came next, her paralegal training evident in the way she carried herself. Her confident, prepared, ready for difficult conversations. Rachel had flown in Friday night, looking tired and apprehensive. When everyone was seated, I looked around the room at my family. David and Jessica on the couch, holding hands like they were bracing for impact. Ethan and Lily on the floor, cross-legged and curious. Rachel in the armchair, her phone face down on the side table for once. Helen and Linda flanking me like gentle guardians. I want to start with apologies, I said. Not because anyone owes them, but because I think we need to clear away the hurt before we can build something better. Mom, you don't need to apologize for anything, David began. Actually, I do. I need to apologize for keeping secrets about the house. I thought I was protecting your pride, but I was really protecting myself from having to have difficult conversations. I turned to Jessica. I need to apologize for resenting your success in this house without ever telling you how I felt. You couldn't read my mind, and it wasn't fair to expect you to. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Margaret, I owe you so many apologies. The things I said about you being a burden were honest, and sometimes honesty hurts before it heals. But they were cruel. I was feeling threatened by your presence, feeling like I could never measure up to your cooking, your relationship with the kids, your history with David. Instead of talking to you about it, I complained to my husband about his mother. That was wrong. David shifted uncomfortably. I should have defended you, Mom. When Jessica said those things, I should have spoken up. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because part of me agreed with her. Not about you being a burden, but about wanting more space, more privacy. I felt guilty about wanting that, so I let Jessica be the bad guy instead of being honest about my own feelings." The admission hung in the air like a challenge. I felt Helen tense beside me, but I kept my voice calm. "Thank you for being honest. That couldn't have been easy to say. I love you, Mom." But I also felt like I was still being taken care of instead of being the man of my own house. I didn't know how to talk to you about that without hurting your feelings. Rachel spoke up suddenly. "I need to apologize too. To all of you, but especially to Mom." She looked directly at me. "I stayed away because it was easier than dealing with family dynamics. I told myself I was busy, that work was demanding, that the kids needed me. But the truth is, I was scared of being pulled back into old patterns where I felt responsible for everyone's emotions." "What old patterns?" Lily asked, speaking for the first time. Rachel glanced at me, asking permission. I nodded. "When Dad was sick, before he died, I felt like I had to be perfect to make things easier for Mom. I couldn't be sad or scared or angry, because she was already carrying so much. After the funeral, I felt like I had to stay strong for David. Had to help Mom figure out finances, had to be the responsible daughter. It was exhausting." "So you left?" Ethan said, not accusingly, but with understanding. "I ran away to college and then across the country and told myself it was about opportunities. But really, I was just tired of feeling responsible for everyone else's happiness." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Rachel, I never wanted you to feel that burden." "I know you didn't. But when you're in survival mode, you don't always think about how your coping mechanisms affect other people. I couldn't save Dad, couldn't fix your grief, couldn't make David more confident. So I saved myself instead." Helen cleared her throat gently. "If I may, I've watched this family for 20 years, and I think you've all been trying to protect each other from pain that was inevitable. Margaret, you tried to protect your children from financial stress by handling everything yourself. David, you tried to protect your mother from your need for independence by avoiding the conversation. Jessica, you tried to protect your marriage by removing what felt like a threat. Rachel, you tried to protect yourself from family trauma by maintaining distance. And what did all that protection accomplish?" Linda asked in her practical way. "It made us strangers to each other," I said quietly. "Not strangers," Ethan said. "But not really family either. Like people who live in the same house but don't actually know each other." Lily nodded. "I always felt like I had to be careful around everyone. Like there were rules I didn't understand, but wasn't allowed to ask about." Jessica wiped her eyes. "I need to tell you all something. When I complained about Margaret being a burden, it wasn't really about her at all. I was feeling like a failure as a wife and mother. I couldn't cook like her, couldn't connect with the kids like her, couldn't manage the household as smoothly. I felt like I was being compared to her constantly and coming up short. I thought if she wasn't here, I could finally feel successful in my own home." "But it is her home," David said quietly. "I'm just starting to understand what that means." "What does it mean?" I asked him. "It means I've been living in my mother's house, eating food my mother prepared, accepting care from my mother, and somehow convincing myself I was the provider. It means I've been so focused on feeling like a man that I forgot to be grateful." "And now?" Rachel asked. "What happens now?" I looked around the room at these people I loved so much, these complicated, imperfect, beautiful people who were finally being honest with each other. Now we figure out how to be a real family instead of people who happen to be related, I said. Now we stop protecting each other from truths that might actually set us free. How do we do that? Lily asked. We start by admitting what we need, I said. David, you need to feel like the head of your household. Jessica, you need to feel successful in your own right. Rachel, you need to feel connected without feeling responsible. Ethan and Lily, you need to know your family's real story, not the sanitized version we've been telling you. And what do you need, Mom? David asked. I need to be seen. Not as a saint or a servant, but as a person with my own dreams, fears, and opinions. I need to matter to you beyond what I can do for you. You do matter, Jessica said fiercely. God, Margaret, you matter so much. I was just too insecure to admit it. Then let's figure out how to make this work, I said. All of us, honestly this time. The conversation continued for hours, tears mixing with laughter, old hurts finally, aired and examined. By the time Helen and Linda left, something fundamental had shifted in the room. We weren't perfect, we weren't fixed, but for the first time in years, we were real with each other, and that felt like a beginning. The real test came 2 weeks later when David asked to speak with me privately. I found him waiting in the kitchen Sunday morning, coffee already made, his face serious. Mom, I've been thinking about our family meeting, about everything that was said. And I want to make some changes, real changes, not just promises that fade away after a few weeks. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. What kind of changes? First, I want to pay you rent for this house. Market rate. You've been subsidizing our lives for too long. David, that's not necessary. It is necessary. For me, it's necessary. I need to feel like I'm contributing to my family's shelter, not just living in my mother's house like a grown child. I studied his face, seeing the determination there. All right, if that's what you need. Second, I want to set up a family investment account. Something we all contribute to, something that belongs to all of us. I'm tired of you bearing the financial burden alone. What about Jessica? Have you discussed this with her? His expression grew complicated. That's the third thing. Jessica and I have been talking about counseling. We need help figuring out how to be married partners instead of me being her child and her being my mother. That's very mature of you, both. And fourth. He paused, gathering courage. I want to plan a trip, for all of us. Somewhere you've always wanted to go. I realized during our family meeting that I know almost nothing about your dreams or interests beyond taking care of us. A trip? You mentioned Ireland to Ethan. Have you always wanted to go there? I felt tears threatening. Since I was 25 and read my first Irish novel. Then we're going to Ireland, all of us, this summer. Before I could respond, Jessica appeared in the doorway, looking nervous but resolved. Margaret, could I join this conversation? There's something I need to say. David gestured to the chair beside him, and Jessica sat down, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our family meeting, she began. About the things I said, about my insecurities, about how I've treated you. Jessica, please let me finish. I need to say this. She took a shaky breath. I've been jealous of you for years. Jealous of how effortlessly you managed this household, how naturally you connected with Ethan and Lily, how much David respected your opinion. I felt like I was always competing with you for relevance in my own home. You never had to compete with me. I know that now, but when you're insecure, everything feels like competition. Every time someone complimented your cooking, I heard criticism of mine. Every time the kids came to you with problems, I felt like a failure as a mother figure. Every time David asked your advice, I felt diminished as his partner. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. I'm sorry you felt that way. I never intended. You never intended anything but kindness. That's what makes this so hard. You weren't trying to undermine me. You were just being yourself. But I was so wrapped up in my own insecurities that I turned your generosity into a threat. David squeezed his wife's other hand. We've been talking about this a lot, about how to share space without feeling territorial. And? I asked. Jessica looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I want to learn from you. Not compete with you. Learn from you. I want to know how you make that pot roast Lily loves. I want to understand how you always know the right thing to say when the kids are upset. I want to be a better partner to David and a better family member to all of you. And I want to stop leaning on you for everything, David added. Mom, you've been my safety net for so long that I forgot how to handle problems myself. That's not fair to you, and it's not healthy for me. What does that look like practically? I asked. It means when the kids need something, Jessica and I handle it first, instead of automatically turning to you. It means when we have financial stress, we work through it as a couple before asking for your help. It means we make decisions about our household together, including you in discussions, but not expecting you to solve everything. Jessica nodded. And it means I stop treating you like competition and start treating you like family, like someone whose wisdom I can learn from, instead of someone whose competence threatens me. I felt something ease in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. And what do you need from me? Patience, Jessica said immediately. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to fall back into old patterns. I need you to call me on it when that happens, but also to believe that I'm really trying to change. And honesty, David added. If we're doing something that makes you feel invisible or taken for granted, tell us. Don't protect our feelings at the expense of your own anymore. I looked at these two people who'd been strangers living in my house just a month ago, and now felt like family I was getting to know for the first time. There's something I need to tell you both, I said, about why I kept the house ownership secret for so long. They waited, giving me space to find the words. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd feel obligated to me, that you'd stay out of guilt instead of choice. I wanted to be chosen, not endured. Mom, David said softly, you are chosen. Maybe we haven't done a good job of showing it, but you're chosen. Even when we've been selfish and thoughtless, Jessica added, we've still wanted you here. We just needed to grow up enough to deserve you. That evening, as I sat in the garden watching the sunset, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The conversations weren't finished. There would be more difficult discussions, more growing pains, more moments of backsliding into old patterns. But the foundation had shifted. The truth was out. The power dynamics had changed. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was living in my own life instead of serving everyone else's. Rachel called just as the last light faded from the sky. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about making time for what matters. And I want to come visit next month. Not for a holiday or an obligation, just to spend time with you. To ask you all those questions I should have been asking years ago. I'd like that very much. And Mom, I love you. Not for what you've done for us, but for who you are. I wanted to make sure you knew that. As I hung up the phone and headed inside my house, owned and occupied by choice rather than obligation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. I felt free. 3 months later, our Sunday dinners had become something entirely different. Instead of me cooking while everyone else socialized, we'd established a rotation system. Jessica had surprised everyone by mastering my pot roast recipe, adding her own creative touches. David had discovered a talent for grilling and took pride in preparing elaborate weekend breakfasts. Even Ethan and Lily had claimed ownership of specific dishes. "Grandma, tell us about the time you and Grandpa got lost in the mountains," Lily said, as we cleared dishes together. It still amazed me how hungry they were for stories, for the family history I'd assumed they'd find boring. Well, it was our 2nd anniversary, and your grandfather insisted he didn't need a map. "Because real men navigate by instinct," Ethan chimed in, repeating the punchline he'd heard before. "Exactly. We ended up spending the night in the car, eating gas station sandwiches and playing 20 questions. "Was it romantic?" Lily asked, with the fascination of a 16-year-old. "It was perfect, not because everything went right, but because we were together and we could laugh about it." Jessica looked up from loading the dishwasher. "Margaret, I've always wondered, do you ever regret not traveling more when you were younger?" It was the kind of question she never would have asked 6 months ago, when our conversation stayed safely surface level. Sometimes. But I'm learning it's never too late to start. "Speaking of which," David said, pulling out his laptop, "I've been researching our Ireland trip. Mom, I found this small hotel in County Cork that serves traditional Irish breakfast and has a library with first edition Irish novels." I felt that familiar flutter of excitement I'd been experiencing more often lately. The feeling of having something to look forward to instead of just responsibilities to manage. "Show me." We spent the next hour planning our itinerary. Everyone contributing ideas. Rachel, joining us by video call from California, suggested historical sites she'd researched. Helen, who'd become a regular at our family dinners, offered to watch the house while we were gone. "You know what I love about this?" Linda said, settling back in her chair with her coffee. 6 months ago, Margaret was planning everyone else's lives. Now everyone's planning together. It was true. The shift had been gradual but profound. David now handled the family finances, consulting me for advice but taking responsibility for decisions. Jessica had taken over most of the household management, asking for my input but not expecting me to do the work. The kids came to me for stories and conversation, not just problem-solving. "I have an announcement," Rachel said from the laptop screen. "I've been thinking about what we discussed during our family meeting, about connection versus obligation." We all turned toward the screen, giving her our full attention. "I've decided to look for a job closer to home. Not because I feel guilty or obligated, but because I want to be part of your lives in a real way. I want my kids to know their grandmother as a person, not just as a voice on holiday phone calls." The silence that followed was full of surprise and joy. "Rachel, are you sure?" David asked. "Your career will survive a geographic change. My family relationships might not survive continued neglect." I felt tears threatening again, the good kind I'd been experiencing more often lately. "Besides," Rachel continued with a grin, "someone needs to make sure you all follow through on treating Mom like a person instead of a saint." "Hey!" Ethan protested. "We're doing better." "You are," she acknowledged. "But I want to be part of it instead of just hearing about it secondhand." Later that evening, as the house settled into its quieter rhythms, Jessica knocked on my bedroom door. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course. Come in." She sat in my reading chair, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For fighting for this family, even when we didn't deserve it." "Jessica, you all deserved honesty and respect. I just took too long to insist on it." "I've been thinking about what kind of mother-in-law I want to be someday. What kind of example I want to set for Ethan and Lily about how families should treat each other. And I want to be the kind who sees her children's spouses as additions to love, not competition to manage. I want to be generous without being invisible, helpful without being taken for granted." "You're already becoming that person." "I hope so. I hope when Ethan or Lily brings someone home, I remember how it feels to be the outsider, trying to find your place in an established family dynamic." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're not an outsider anymore. You haven't been for a while. Neither are you. That's what I'm trying to say. You're not the helpful mother-in-law or the live-in babysitter. You're family. And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand the difference." That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Not younger, but more vibrant, more present, more alive. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the moment I overheard those words about being a burden to tonight's conversation about being family. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Grandma, I'm writing a paper about influential women for my sociology class. Can I interview you about your life sometime this week?" I smiled as I typed back, "I'd be honored." Another text, this one from Lily. "Movie night tomorrow? I picked something I think you'll actually like, not just something I want to watch." And then David. "Mom, Jessica and I were talking. We want to start having regular family meetings. Not crisis meetings, just check-ins. What do you think?" Finally, Rachel. "I found 3 potential jobs in your area. I'm going to start applying next week. I'm ready to come home." I set the phone down and looked around my room. My real room, in my real house, surrounded by my real family, who finally saw me as a real person. For the first time in decades, I felt completely, authentically, myself. And it was enough. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my Irish bed and breakfast, helping the proprietor prepare traditional soda bread while my family explored the nearby village. It was our last morning in Ireland, and I was savoring every moment. "You have a lovely family," Mrs. O'Brien said, as we kneaded dough together. "They clearly adore you." "It took us a while to figure out how to show it properly," I replied. "But yes, I think they do." Through the window, I could see David and Jessica walking hand in hand down the cobblestone street, talking animatedly. They looked relaxed, in a way I hadn't seen in years. Ethan and Lily were examining something in a shop window, probably souvenirs for friends back home. "And what about you?" Mrs. O'Brien asked. "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because I had to think about my answer. When was the last time someone had asked about my happiness as something separate from my family's well-being? "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I am happy." "Good. Happiness suits you." That afternoon, as we Sat in a pub sharing our last Irish meal together. Rachel raised her pint of Guinness in a toast. To Mom, she said, for teaching us that it's never too late to tell the truth. To Grandma, Ethan added, for showing us that being strong doesn't mean being silent. To Margaret, Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion, for being patient while we learned how to be family. To my mother, David concluded, for loving us enough to demand better from us. As we clinked glasses, I felt the weight of years of invisibility finally lifting completely. These people saw me now. Not as a function or a service, but as Margaret, a woman with her own dreams and stories and worth. I have something to tell you all, I said when the toasts had settled. I've made a decision about the house. They grew quiet, alert to the serious tone in my voice. I'm going to deed it to all of us. Equally, David, Rachel, and myself as co-owners. Mom, you don't need to. David started. I want to, not because I'm trying to buy your love or secure my place, but because I want us to truly share it. I want it to be our family home, owned by our family, not just inherited when I'm gone. What does that mean, practically? Rachel asked. It means we all have equal say in decisions about the house. It means if I ever do decide I want to move somewhere else, we make that decision together. It means the house belongs to our family's future, not just my past. Jessica wiped away tears. Margaret, are you sure? I'm sure. But there are conditions. They waited, probably expecting rules about chores or financial contributions. The condition is that we keep talking to each other. Really talking. The way we have been these past few months. I don't want us to slip back into politeness and assumption. We won't, Lily said fiercely. I like knowing you, Grandma. I like hearing your stories and your opinions and your dreams. Even when I disagree with you about your curfew? Especially then. At least now I know you're not just being mean. You actually care about my safety. When we returned home, Helen and Linda were waiting with a welcome back dinner and eager ears for our travel stories. As I described the rolling green hills and ancient castles, I realized something profound had shifted in how I talked about experiences. I wasn't just reporting events for others' entertainment. I was sharing moments that had meaning for me personally. And what was your favorite part? Linda asked. The Book of Kells at Trinity College? I said without hesitation. Standing in that library, surrounded by centuries of preserved stories, I felt connected to something eternal, to the idea that stories matter, that preserving them matters. Speaking of stories, Helen said with a mischievous smile, I have news. I entered one of your pieces in a writing contest. My heart stopped. You did what? That essay you wrote about rediscovering yourself after retirement. The one you shared with me last month. I submitted it to the local newspaper's personal essay contest. Helen, you can't just... You won. The room went silent. I won? $500 and publication in next Sunday's edition. They want to interview you about writing later in life. I stared at her, speechless. After all these years of setting aside my writing dreams, someone had read my words and found them worthy. Mom, you've been writing? David asked. Just personal essays. Nothing important. It's important enough to win a contest, Rachel pointed out. What else haven't you told us about your secret talents? They're not secret, I protested. You just never asked. The irony hung in the air for a moment before Ethan grinned. Well, we're asking now. What else should we know about our mysterious grandmother? I'm not mysterious. I'm just finally letting myself be interesting. That evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been invisible, in my own life, grateful for scraps of attention from the family I'd sacrificed everything to serve. Now I was a co-owner of my home, a contest-winning writer, a person whose opinions were sought and valued. I was planning a trip to visit Rachel in her new job, looking forward to weekly writing group meetings with Linda and Helen, and excited about the novel I'd finally started again. More importantly, I was living my own life while still being part of my family's lives. The balance I'd never thought possible had somehow been achieved. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, I'm proud of you. Not for what you've done for us, but for who you're becoming." Another from Jessica. "Thank you for showing me what it looks like to be strong and kind at the same time." From Rachel. "I start my new job Monday. First weekend visit is planned for next month. Can't wait to read your published essay." From Ethan. "Grandma, you're the coolest person I know. Don't let it go to your head." From Lily. "Can you teach me to write like you? I want to tell stories that matter too." I smiled as I put the phone away and looked up at the stars. Tom would be proud, I thought. Not just of the family we'd raised, but of the woman I'd finally allowed myself to become. I was no longer the silent pillar holding up everyone else's dreams. I was Margaret Wilson, mother, grandmother, writer, homeowner, dreamer. I was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who I was. And after 65 years of living for others, I was finally fully alive for myself. The truth, as difficult as it had been to tell, had indeed set us all free. I raised my teacup to the stars in a quiet toast. To dignity reclaimed and to the courage to demand the love we deserve. The night air carried my words away, but the truth they contained had taken root in all of us. Some stories end with revenge, but the best ones end with redemption. This was one of the best ones.